Hey there! So this has been an eventful year with ups and downs, lots of smiles and some frowns. So today I'll go over 22 life lessons I learned this year. Lessons I'm taking forward with me into the new year. Hi, if you're new here, my name is Peter Cook, and on this channel we speak about living with intention, slow living, minimalism, that kind of stuff. Let's dive right in. It's okay to drop the lemon tart. I'm a big fan of Chef's Table. In the very first episode, Massimo Bottura, who's the chef of 3 Michelin star restaurant Osteria Francesana in Modena, Italy, I hope I pronounced that right, tells the origin story of his dish Oops, I Dropped the Lemon Tart. His Japanese sous chef Taka dropped one of the last 2 lemon tarts on the counter. He just wanted to disappear from the face of the earth. But Massimo saw it as an opportunity to create a new original dish. Taka said, "That day I learned something, that in life, to move forward, you learn from mistakes. Maybe I did something wrong, but you learn from it." I'm a perfectionist, so I can relate to Taka. What I take away from this is that I need to have empathy with myself when I make a mistake. It's not the end of the world. Often we can be our own worst critic, judging our actions more strongly than anyone else would. But look at Thomas Edison. He made 1,000 unsuccessful attempts at inventing the light bulb. But when a reporter asked how those 1,000 failures felt, he replied that he didn't fail 1,000 times. The light bulb was an invention with 1,000 steps. Failure is part of the journey. It's okay to drop the lemon tart. Something great can come out of it, like a caterpillar turning into a butterfly, or a phoenix rising from the ashes. A salesman won't give you a TV for free just because you watch TV the best. If I'm honest, I'm not the biggest fan of Kanye West, especially with how he's been behaving over the last couple of years. But I heard so many raving reviews about his Netflix documentary that I decided to check it out. And wow, it did not disappoint. You have to watch it if you haven't already. The first 2 episodes focus on his rise to fame, when he's only seen as a producer, but he's trying to score a record deal as a rapper. There's a scene where his cousin comes up to him, he's sitting in a car, and the cousin says a rapper has reached out to him. He wants to rap in front of Kanye, hoping he might impress him and get a beat for free. At that time, Kanye wasn't a rapper yet, but he was already charging tens of thousands of dollars for a beat. And he had produced H to the Izzo for Jay-Z. So his cousin explains the situation, and Kanye isn't having it. He says, "It's like you go into a TV store and say to the salesman, 'I watch TV the best.' The salesman won't care, he's still selling TVs. He's not going to give you a TV for free just because you watch TV the best." I love that scene, and the lesson here is to know your worth. If you're good, people will pay you for it. But you have to be confident in your skills. In the creative industry, it's common for freelancers to be asked to work for free in exchange for exposure. And maybe there's a time and place for that when you're just starting out and want to build up your portfolio. But I've learned that you have to watch out for yourself and value your time. I remember being asked to write a blog post for this co-working website on a day about my life as a remote worker. It was sold to me as a fun, cool thing for me, so I wrote it. But when I did the math afterward, I realized I had spent a few hours answering the questions they sent me, and they got free content out of me. Our time is our most valuable, non-renewable resource, so I want to be intentional about how I spend it. If I say yes to one thing, I say no to something else at the same time. Naval Ravikant even suggests setting an aspirational hourly rate, one that's absurdly high. You may not charge anyone this rate, but it's a way to raise the bar for yourself, to value your time and work. That way, you get fair compensation for your time instead of giving away TVs for free to a person that says they're very good at watching TV. The minimalist lifestyle has minimal rules. When I first learned about minimalism, I thought it was about living with as few possessions as possible. And a lot of people believe that. They think of minimalism as depriving themselves, living with almost nothing, even giving up things they love or find useful. But minimalism is not dogmatic, it's what you make of it. I came across this Elite Daily article which sums it up nicely. This minimal lifestyle offers minimal rules. Joining the club requires merely the motivation to live simply and be happy. Minimalism is not about what you own, and it's not about numbers. Just because some extreme minimalist owns 1 fork and 1 spoon, it doesn't mean you have to as well if you want to be a minimalist. Minimalism is more of a mindset, a framework that you can use to get rid of life success to create space for what you truly care about. There are no hard rules. We can take the parts we like, that really make a difference in our lives, and have fun with it. Good hay rarely comes from bad grass. There's this Dutch singer who I really like, Daniel Lohuus. He lives in the countryside and uses a lot of metaphors in his songs based on his surroundings. One of his songs really resonated with me this year. He sings about how he had to break up with his partner because he couldn't go on anymore. However, he felt guilty and confused, until he discussed it with an old farmer who told him, "Good hay rarely comes from bad grass. Nature shows you how things are supposed to go." And then it all comes together for him. They weren't a good match. Their relationship was like bad grass, and it was unlikely it would turn into good hay, so it was best to break up. I find this metaphor useful when I think about whether or not I should continue a project I'm struggling with, or invest more in a friendship that feels very one-sided. There's this thing called sunk cost fallacy, which basically means that once you've invested time and energy in something, you're likely to follow through on it, even if that is a bad decision. But then, when I ask myself if this is bad grass, I get clarity on the right course of action, sunk cost or not. Money doesn't necessarily lead to happiness, but not having it leads to unhappiness. Maybe you've heard the stories about people winning millions of dollars in the lottery, only to spend it all shortly after. Or famous pop stars suffering from depression. Having money is nice, but it doesn't necessarily lead to happiness. There's this concept called hedonic adaptation, which states that whatever happens, we return to a relatively stable baseline of happiness after a while. So money doesn't necessarily lead to long-lasting happiness. However, not having money definitely leads to unhappiness. Money may not solve all life's problems, but it solves money problems. And not having enough money can make you very unhappy. When you're constantly struggling to make ends meet, it's difficult to spend time on things that add meaning to your life. It's one reason I'm drawn to minimalism. By owning fewer possessions and buying fewer things, I have lowered my expenses. And this creates mental clarity and more time in my schedule to work on things I care about, such as making these YouTube videos. Penelope Cruz speaks 3 times as fast in Spanish movies. So this one is random, but after seeing Vanilla Sky with Tom Cruise and Penelope Cruz, I decided to also watch the original Spanish movie, Abre los Ojos. And not surprisingly, the original is much better than the Hollywood remake. I then learned about Pedro Almodóvar, the director who describes Penelope Cruz as his muse. They made 7 movies together. So after watching movies like Todo sobre mi madre, Dolor y Gloria, and Volver, I was blown away by how good an actress Penelope Cruz is. Just wow, what a powerhouse. Seriously, if you only know her from Hollywood movies like Bandidas, check out her Spanish movies. But one thing I noticed was how fast she speaks in Spanish. And not just her, everyone. It was like a machine gun of words. Bum, 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 bum. I figured it must be hard being a Spanish screenwriter. They must write 3 times as many words to write a 90-minute movie script than their English colleagues. Show, don't tell. Trying to change someone's ways often backfires, whether it's your partner, family member, or roommate. Why can't they just fill in the blank? Exercise more, eat less, read more books, smile more, whatever. I found that the best way to inspire someone to change their ways is to lead by example, to be the change you wish to see in your world. In the Bible, Jesus says to first remove the beam out of your own eye, and then you can see clearly to remove the speck out of someone else's eye. Meaning we are quick to judge others, while our pride prevents us from having an honest self-reflection. I've been guilty of this, not living a life true to my values yet being annoyed when others didn't. So by taking ownership myself, whether it's having a healthy lifestyle, a positive mindset, or learning a new skill, I can show the positive effects it has in my life. But it has to come from the right place. I need to take these actions for me, to live a more authentic life and attract like-minded people. If I only do it to try to change someone else's behavior, they'll see straight through it and pop that balloon. It is our failure to become our perceived ideal that ultimately defines us and makes us unique. So I learned this lesson from Conan O'Brien, who shared it in his 2011 Dartmouth commencement speech. He talked about how in 1940, Jack Benny was a giant star, one of the greatest comedians of his generation. And Johnny Carson wanted to be Jack Benny. And in some ways he was, but in many ways he wasn't. He emulated Jack Benny, but he had his own quirks and his mannerisms that, along with the TV gaining popularity, pulled him in a different direction. His failure to completely become his hero made him the funniest person of his generation. David Letterman wanted to be Johnny Carson and was not. And the comedians of Conan's generation wanted to be David Letterman, yet none of them are. They all missed that mark in 1,000 different ways. But their failure to become their perceived ideal ultimately defines each of them and makes them unique. So this story reminds me of Naval Ravikant's tweet, "Escape competition through authenticity." And I take comfort in that. I look at YouTubers like Matt D'Avella, Ali Abdaal and Nathaniel Drew, and I take inspiration from how they speak on camera, how they edit their videos, how they use B-roll, but I will never be them. And that's okay. I take consolation in knowing that my failure to become them will ultimately define me and make me unique. Every city has its own whisper. So when I lived in Vietnam, in Saigon, a friend told me every city has its own whisper. Saigon whispers hustle, and Chiang Mai in Thailand whispers relax. And I found that to be spot on. Different cities or towns have their own unique vibe. And it's good to be aware of that. I've learned that it may mean I need to compensate for what the city I live in doesn't whisper. For example, in Saigon I was very productive, but it was difficult for me to relax. When I returned to Chiang Mai, it was like falling back into a pile of pillows. I felt more peaceful. But after a few days I noticed that I was so relaxed I wasn't getting much done. I needed a bit of oomph. So what I learned is that to stay balanced, I need to understand what the city I live in whispers, so I can compensate for what it's not whispering. So for example, if I want to live more slowly in a busy city, I want to make sure my home is peaceful and find parks to slow down. And if I spend time in a quieter town, I find it helpful to work from a co-working space. When I'm surrounded by people working, I find it easier to get my work done. And by the way, this YouTube channel also has its own whisper. Subscribe. Did you catch that? Slow burns instead of heavy lifts. This is a concept I picked up from Tiago Forte's book Building a Second Brain. Often when we start a project, we go from 0 to 100 in a short time. Let's say I want to publish a YouTube video next week and I have to start from scratch. Now I need a topic, do my research, write the script, record the A-roll and B-roll, edit the video, come up with a title, create a thumbnail. It's a heavy lift. It can be done, but it's exhausting if I need to do this week in, week out. And another downside is that I can only draw on the ideas I have in the very moment. A better approach is what Tiago Forte calls slow burns. It's like having 10 pots on the stove, which are at different degrees of cooking. These are ideas, projects at different levels of completion, incubating over time. The great thing about slow burns is that you can benefit from creative input over a longer period of time. For example, for this video, I slowly added lessons for the script over the course of the year, whenever I picked up something new that I resonated with. Another benefit of the slow burn approach for me is that I'm never out of video ideas. I always have 5 to 10 videos simmering on the stove. Your mind is for having ideas, not holding them. I learned this lesson from David Allen, author of the classic self-help book Getting Things Done. It's the foundation of his GTD system, which is a funnel for all those brain farts. If an idea is actionable, you do it, delegate it or defer it. David Allen writes that our minds are not meant for endless storage of facts and figures. I only have to think back to my high school education to know how true that is. When you don't get the ideas out of your head, they take up a lot of brain power and clog the system. But if you write them down somewhere to process later, they're gone. As far as your brain's concerned, it's been dealt with. So now, whenever an idea pops up, I write it down somewhere. If I have my phone at hand, I'll write it down in Apple Notes, or on a piece of paper if I don't have my phone with me. Ultimately, everything ends up in an inbox, and then a couple of times per week, I empty that inbox by actioning the tasks, or moving them to where they belong, like adding a video idea to my Notion video ideas page. I find that this helps me in keeping my head clear. I get to instead of I have to. This is a little mindset hack that I found very helpful. On any given day, there are a bunch of tasks on my to-do list that need to get done. Sending emails to clients, drafting a document, cooking. And not all those things are fun. So with all these daily tasks, life can start feeling like a drag. But what I found to be helpful is to tell myself I get to send this email, I get to pay this invoice, instead of I have to. When you think of it, it's a miracle that we're on this tiny planet somewhere in the corner of the universe, one that's bursting with life. And I've been given some time to experience life on this planet. Sure, some of the things I get to do are more fun than others, but to a certain extent, we create our own reality because our experience is what we give attention to. And by reframing tasks as ones I get to instead of have to do, I cultivate a sense of wonder about life and just make my day a little bit lighter than it otherwise would be. Costa Rica has a backstab bridge. So I was in Costa Rica earlier this year, and although this may technically not be a lesson, I learned something interesting there. In 2003, Taiwan built a bridge for $26 million in Costa Rica. It's called Puente de la Amistad de Taiwan, or the Taiwan Friendship Bridge. It was supposed to be a symbol of the country's eternal friendship. Yet, just a few years later, in 2007, China was like, how about we build you a stadium in the capital San Jose, a $110 million stadium? And Costa Rica was like, all right, sounds good. So they severed diplomatic ties with Taiwan in favor of China. The stadium was built in 2 years and completed in 2011. I saw the national team, the Ticos, play and win a World Cup qualifier game there against Canada. The game was a lot of fun, but I can't help but feel for Taiwan. Their bridge is now colloquially known as the Backstab Bridge. Slow living does not mean doing everything slowly. If you've never heard of the slow living lifestyle, you may think that it means taking everything slowly. I struggled with this year. I would do my cardio at home and face the slow sign on my wall, and found it distracting. It would literally affect my energy level looking at it, so I would turn a bit to the side so I could do a proper workout. But slow living is not so much about doing everything at half speed. Instead, it's about taking a step back, figuring out which things matter most to us, and then doing those things well, at the right speed. In that sense, it overlaps with minimalism. Minimalism is not simply about having as few possessions as possible. Decluttering is a means to a bigger end, which is to create more freedom and space for the things we really care about, so we can live a more happy, fulfilled life. And the goal of slow living is the same. It takes deliberate practice to master a skill, not just 10,000 hours. So maybe you've heard about this rule that it takes about 10,000 hours to master a skill. Malcolm Gladwell popularized it in his book Outliers. It's based on a study done by Anders Ericsson in the early 90s with violinists at Berlin's Global Music Academy. And yes, Ericsson found that, on average, it takes about 10,000 hours of practice spread over 10 years to become an expert at something. But more importantly, experts practice differently. It's called deliberate practice. And that's the part of the 10,000 hour rule that is often missed. How you practice matters more than how long you practice. Deliberate practice is where you set a stretch goal, strive to reach that goal with great effort and undivided attention, and seek feedback so you can learn where to improve. For example, if I want to really master playing guitar, goofing around for an hour a day playing whatever I feel like is not enough. If it was, I would be the next John Fahey now. If I wanted to become a guitar virtuoso, I'll need to study the major and minor scales, pentatonic scales, fingerpicking, and bring it all together. So the takeaway is that practice doesn't make perfect, perfect practice makes perfect. I will never go to a bullfight again. I spent some time in the south of Spain this year, and I would often walk past a bull ring. It's this beautiful building. Sometimes there'd be a concert, and then one day they announced that there would be a bullfight. Now, almost anywhere else in the world, people strongly disapprove of bullfights. In Spain, people are divided on the topic. A city like Barcelona has turned its bull ring into a shopping mall, but the tradition is still very much alive in Madrid and Andalusia. And the traditionalists emphasize how it's an art. I believe you can only truly form an opinion about something when you've done proper research, and not just follow other people's lead. And just because you read a ton about coffee doesn't mean you know what coffee tastes like. I know that's not exactly the same thing, but still, I decided that I would not judge this book by its cover, and I bought a ticket for the bullfight. The first thing I noticed was that it's very popular. The stadium was sold out. And it's an event, people really dress up for it. Once I was inside, it was very lively. People were waving at each other, there was a band playing music, and then the first bull entered the arena. So a typical night will have 6 different bullfights, with each following the same pattern. A bullfight has 3 stages, in which the bull is first injured and ultimately killed by the matador. I could see how there's an art to what the matador does, but I found the whole thing very disturbing. I was secretly rooting for the bull. But it's not a fair fight. If it was just a fight between the matador and the bull, without any help, many matadors would get badly injured, yet this almost never happens. Because he has a lot of helpers who do half of the work. So after 2 bullfights, I left the stadium. I'd seen enough. And for days after that, I felt unsettled. The image of a wounded bull would come to mind, panicked, not knowing what was happening to him. So I've seen it once, but I know I'll never go to a bullfight again. YouTube is hard and a lot of fun. I started this YouTube channel as an excuse to learn more about minimalism and later slow living. I wanted to share the journey and the lessons I learned along the way. But I underestimated how much work it is. First there's the research, then I script the videos and record the A-roll and B-roll. And then with that raw material, I try to edit an engaging video, create a compelling title and thumbnail, and then finally hit publish. Some videos do well, others get almost no views, which can be frustrating at times. I often struggle to find the time to make these videos, besides my full-time job, going to the gym, and also enjoying some time off as well. But when I work on these videos, I really enjoy it. It feels meaningful. I get to learn about what it means to live with intention and inspire viewers like you. And as I accumulate more knowledge and skills, these start to interact with each other, sparking new video ideas. So yes, doing YouTube is hard, but it's a lot of fun too. Say thank you to items before letting go of them. When I watched Sparking Joy with Marie Kondo on Netflix, I picked up something that I'd never done before, but really resonated with. Saying thank you to items before discarding them. I mean, I'm not gonna say thank you for every pen or piece of paper I'm discarding, but I like this idea for sentimental items. It can be hard to let go of things that hold emotional value. An old stuffed animal or that handmade wooden puzzle you bought on that amazing trip to Cambodia. Even more so if they were gifted to us by a loved one. I mean, I feel guilty even entertaining the thought of donating an item like that. But if I decide that it's time for this item to move on because it no longer brings me joy, or even worse, it drags me down, I like this idea of taking a moment to acknowledge how or why I got it initially, what joy or meaning it brought to my life, and then to express my gratitude for that. I don't like the heat. I lived in Thailand for a few years, and sometimes my family members or friends are surprised when they learn that I struggle with the heat, especially when I'm working. When it's hot, I find it more difficult to focus and I don't sleep well, which makes me moody during the day. But the thing is, in Thailand, especially in cities, you're only outside during the day when you go from one air-conditioned space to the next one. At least I was. Every apartment, every shop, every co-working space, every restaurant has air conditioning. That's not the case in Europe, not even in Italy or the south of Spain. I like this feeling of being outside at 9 AM in a mountain village where I can wear jeans and a t-shirt. The sun is out, but there's still a chilly breeze with cool night air, with a maximum temperature in the afternoon of 25 degrees Celsius. But summers are getting hotter in all of Europe, so I've had to deal with that this year. I don't have air conditioning in my apartment, but because I'm more aware of it now, when it's too hot, I work from a co-working space with air conditioning, which has really helped with my productivity. FBR, fast, bad and wrong. Fast, bad and wrong is intentionally misspelled here, is another way of saying done is better than perfect. Safi Bahcall spoke about this on the Tim Ferriss show in the context of writing. Perfectionists tend to not get anything done because they write a few paragraphs and then stop to check the style, the facts, to doubt what they just wrote. When you instead write fast, bad and wrong on purpose, it's liberating. You can focus on the narrative and just see where it takes you. Editing and self-doubt take a back seat. Now, I'm a perfectionist myself. I remember building my first e-commerce website. It's no longer online, but I was very excited about it at the time. I spent days figuring out the most pleasing color combination for the site. But it didn't matter. The product I sold had such low margins, I was never going to be profitable. And that taught me a valuable lesson. Don't overthink it, do the work and put it out there. I can always course correct later. It's the same with these YouTube videos. For most of my videos, I've scripted everything and delivered the lines verbatim. That's a lot of work, and I also feel it limits my ability to express myself freely. I can't just go with the flow of the moment when something pops up in my head. So I've been experimenting with speaking freely in front of the camera. And I do practice sessions at home, where I just set up the camera and talk about a book I just read or a TV show I like, just to get better, be more natural at speaking on camera. And this notion of fast, bad and wrong helps me get there. You are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. If I'm honest, I don't really know who Jim Rohn is, but I know this is a famous quote from him. And it really resonated with me this year. It's this idea that we're not individuals living in a vacuum making decisions based on nothing more than our free will. Whether we like it or not, we're social beings. And the decisions we make are heavily influenced by our upbringing. Education, opportunities we were given, people we admire or dislike. When I started contemplating that I'm the average of the 5 people I spend the most time with, I realized how important it is to carefully pick these people. Who do I want to be? And who aligns with my values and who doesn't? This has helped me to create distance from toxic people, because I realized being around them was negatively affecting my state of mind. And it also caused me to be more proactive in building stronger relationships with people I connect with and want to spend more time with. Benjamin Hardy wrote something similar in his book Willpower Doesn't Work. He argues that by shaping your environment, you can make quantum leaps in your development. And it goes further than the people you hang out with. Those 5 people that Jim Rohn spoke of, you don't have to know all of them personally. These days, you can tap into the minds of authors, podcast hosts, or YouTubers you admire. Honestly, if you like learning new things and become a better, happier person, this is such an amazing time to do it. Meditating on the vastness of the universe is humbling. So this year I read Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir, who also wrote The Martian. It's basically a buddy story between an astronaut and an alien, who team up in the Tau Ceti system to figure out how they can save their respective civilizations. And it brought back memories of when I was young. I would sometimes lie in bed and visualize being an astronaut in a spacesuit, drifting through the vastness of the universe. I find that meditating on how big the universe is, what Oliver Bergman calls cosmic insignificance therapy, it puts things in perspective. It's humbling. It makes me grateful that I get to spend some time on Earth, this planet that's bursting with life. We're all together on this little blip in space. And I feel that if more people truly realized how small and vulnerable we are at a cosmic level, we wouldn't focus on our differences as much as we do. I'm not so naive to think that there wouldn't be any conflict anymore, but I feel that if we all truly in our core had this experience, not just knowing at an intellectual level, but the wisdom of how small we are in this universe, we might appreciate our fellow human beings a little bit more. And any disagreement would be held in a bigger knowing that we're all in it together, which creates an incentive to figure out a solution that works for everyone. Sadly, history is full of events where one country, religion, or civilization feels superior over another and forces its way of doing things on others, with lots of suffering as a result. It just makes me wonder, what if an alien like Rocky in Project Hail Mary would show up on Earth? Would we find common ground, knowing that we're not alone in the universe? One way in which I have chosen to shape my environment is by becoming a minimalist. I made a video about it called How Minimalism Changed My Life. It's one of the most popular videos on the channel, and you can watch it here. So thanks for sticking with me until the end of this video. Hopefully 1 or 2 lessons I learned resonated with you. Take care, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye!